Good day, everybody. I am the original gamer, StevieStrow, and I am joined by a couple of very special guests. I have with me on my left, Curtis Boyle of the Color Computer Games List. Hello, Curtis.
Hello.
And I also have the man from down under, Nick Marentes, is with us as well.
Good day, everyone.
Good day, good day. And the purpose of this video is we're going to talk about music on the color computer. We're going to show or let you hear what some of the stock music sounds like. We are going to show some of the really crafty music that was created by people using software. The main thing that we should point out is that the color computer did not have a dedicated sound chip or sound synthesizer, unlike some of its contemporaries like the Atari, the Commodore, a few others. I think the TI had one as well. So there were certain computers that had built-in hardware that allowed it to play really good sounding music, and that music could play in the background or play beneath your software. And that was a nice feature. And so what people on the color computer did was do basically sorcery and black magic to allow this to happen. So what I'm going to do real quick is we're going to try the sound command here. And this is what normal color computer sounded like to us in BASIC. That was pretty awesome, wasn't it?
Yep. The old 60 with the 60 hertz square sine wave, if I remember correctly.
Yeah, and one of the things you did notice is that while that was playing, I lost my cursor, and there was nothing I can do because the computer was using pretty much the entire CPU to generate that sound loop. And if you didn't understand or know how to do assembly language and take advantage of processors and time sharing and things like that, there was no way to really get music to play and do any type of animation or anything else. You really had to know how to make the system work well. And so the other command was a command called play, where you could actually play in BASIC and do some notes. And what would you suggest we play here, Curtis, as you are the musician?
Oh, geez. A, D, D, E. Try L4. Quarter note.
Okay. So once again, you kind of hear that sound, and it's very unremarkable.
Yeah, the only real difference is the play command, besides being a bit easier if you're trying to actually transcribe notes by name, is that it had some much faster, quicker sounds that you could actually mix a bunch of notes together, even switch octaves and volumes, and you can get some of the sound effects that didn't sound too bad. They actually did sound, kind of like synthesizer sound effects. But once again, as you stated, it pretty well locked up everything else, and you could move graphics around and everything else at the same time.
So out of the box, using standard BASIC and extended color BASIC, there was not a lot you could do with the CoCo. Now, what I'm going to show you now is a very cool program that was called Musica. And Musica was a third-party software that allowed us to play multi-voice music. And depending on your music vocabulary, you either refer to that as polyphonic or multi-voice, but it's more than one instrument sound at the same time. And I believe the CoCo could do up to 4 voices.
I think a few pushed it even beyond that, didn't they, Nick?
I can't remember. I only ever heard the 4-voice version.
Yeah, I think I heard 1.5, and I know the CoCo 3, some people had pushed it up to 6 because it had more CPU time to it.
But a CoCo 2 on average did about 3 or 4 voices.
Yeah.
That had to be done in assembly language, and even to get, and since you guys know programming better than I do, in order to get it to sound like 2 or more instruments were playing, you were kind of time slicing those different instruments on odd cycles, right? Even in odd cycles?
Not quite. You kind of mix them together. You add them together and then divide by the quantity of notes. Is that how it works?
Some sort of additive synthesis, yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
So basically, you had to take all your samples and add them together. So the more voices you played once, the more you had to add, the more time it took. And if you want a nice smooth sound, you had to do these samples quite often, not 60 times per second like BASIC does. You'd have to do it like 1,000, 2,000, 4,000 times per second.
Wow. So what we're going to play right now is, this was one of the Musica sample discs that had a couple of different songs. And so we have agreed we wanted to hear Mission Impossible. So we'll go ahead and play this one up, and you can hear what the CoCo can do. But one of the things you'll notice as well is that while this is playing, we've lost control of our computer. We can no longer interact with the system because it's pretty much eaten up the CPU. So here we have it, and I guess I need to hit the keyboard on my CoCo and not my PC. Turn that up for a second. Not bad.
Yeah.
Polyphonic.
Is that using sine waves or square waves?
Musica you had some settings you could actually change that.
Yeah,
so it depends on how the song was written. I imagine this one's probably not square. It's probably a staircase or something.
Yeah.
Not bad.
Yeah, you can hear chords and stuff there, so you definitely get a polyphonic feel.
This was fairly classic CoCo sounding music. It sounded kind of organy to me.
Yep.
And interestingly enough, that program itself was written in BASIC. It was kind of a menu front end, but there was a command that would let you play the music files. I remember writing some demos that would do that too, or I'd write a demo that would play a Musica file. So what we've kind of heard so far is we've heard the stock CoCo sound that you could manipulate in BASIC. We've heard a fairly cool third-party music composition software that did allow for multi-voice software. And now I think the next thing we're going to do is we're going to show a couple of different games. And there was good music in the games, and that's one sign of a good game, is if the developer, this is one of my measuring sticks, was it good graphics, good sound effects, did it also have music, did it have multi-voice music? Those are some of the holy grail things you look for in an awesome game. So we'll show some of the different games that did multi-voice music, and for the most part it was done here and there, and when it was done, it did kind of interrupt the flow of what the computer was doing. But we're going to show one in particular game that was pretty revolutionary because it actually had continuous background music while you were playing. And so, as unremarkable as it may seem by today's standards, during the days of the CoCo, it was a pretty cool feat. And that game was called Grabber. So we're going to show you a couple of titles that use good CoCo music, and then we'll show you one that did pretty much do a good job of playing in the background.
4 bytes.
All right, so we're getting ready to pull up a pretty cool game from the CoCo days called Clowns and Balloons. And one of the things you'll see at the very beginning, this was a very cool trademark feature of Datasoft, is there's kind of this animated marquee where the colors kind of cycle around on the logo title screen. And it did have multi-voice music, it did have animation, but the animation kind of moved in sync to the rhythm of the music because it was moving in between those cycles. So let's check it out. So that was cool. That was multi-voice music, and that was always a nice feature. So okay, so there we saw the bonus. And he did kind of dance, but he's dancing in time with the music,
yep,
which is intentional. So there you have it. We will... So that was a little peek at Clowns and Balloons, and so what we did see was we saw some music on the front of the game, we saw some music in the middle of the game mixed with animation, and the animation was kind of strategically done to have the guy's arms kind of dance to the tune of the music because that's just how we mixed the sound and the animation. So
yeah, and that was the most popular way if you were trying to mix animation. Would be a very small animation because you didn't have a lot of CPU time left over to do polyphonic. Like Sailor Man, the introduction to the sailors tapping his toe and playing the organ was playing a couple of songs there. Same type of situation.
Right, we should pull that up. Let me look for that one. That was on Sea Dragon.
Yeah.
So we're looking at another game that actually did good use of polyphonic music and animation. This is kind of the intro screen to Sea Dragon. And one of the things that you notice is that the guy's foot's tapping and his accordion is moving in time with the music. And this again was due to some of the limitations of mixing graphics, animation, and sound.
And digitized speech while you're at it.
And digitized speech. He just said, "Welcome aboard, Captain," too. So this was pretty cool that you had all these kind of nice fluffy features right on top. Right as soon as you open up the game, you're just kind of wowed with something. So this was a very cool game and really exploited some of the capabilities of the color computer, I felt.
Yeah. I have to agree there, too.
And I could just sit here and watch this guy tap his feet and play this music probably all day long. But we'll go ahead and move on to one more example of this before we show some hardware-based music. And then we're going to show you one more here. This is the world-famous Donkey King clone of Donkey Kong for the Color Computer 1 and 2. Had multi-voice music, which it also used for the barrel jumping sounds. And what you'll see is that whenever the sound is generated in-game, the game actually does freeze for just a moment. So there's your intro music. Here's me jumping. Him walking is a very short clicking sound because we had to have the short sound to not freeze up the game. And I'm going to jump over a barrel, and you actually see that whole game will freeze for a second while it makes that fanfare music. For that moment, the game froze. So this was pretty typical, that we had music that we could play. We had sound effects that were often polyphonic as well, but quite often those things would cause the entire system to pause momentarily as sound was being made. So the last thing we'll show you then before we move on to the hardware was Grabber, which bent the rules. So Grabber was a pretty cool exception to that. All right, so what we're looking at here is Grabber from, what is it, Mike Hughley is his name?
Huey, yeah.
Huey. So it sounds a little bit repetitive. It sounds a little bit monotonous, but it is polyphonic music that's playing in the background.
And there's different tunes as you go further into the game. You will notice as more and more creatures come out, though, it'll start slowing down the graphics and the sound because it's really using a lot of CPU time.
Which makes sense. Okay, even that sound. Now that did cause the game to pause for a second. But this was pretty remarkable because we didn't have the benefit of hardware to make the sound. So very clever software did the trick here.
And precision timing to get it to work.
And the length of the notes are very quick notes. It's not there's no long extended note here that you hear. So it's a quick tempo tune. And I can't remember if the
other songs did or not. There's at least 3 or 4 different tunes that I've been to in the game. Like there's the bonus round tune, then the next batch of the different A's has a different tune again.
Okay.
There's a bit of variety in the music, but I think you're right. I don't think there's anything with really long notes.
So yeah, it's pretty remarkable that we were able to get background music that didn't seem to slow the game down or freeze it up. Well, we also have a bonus entry here in the Color Computer Sound and Music Generation Showcase here. And since we're lucky enough to have Nick Marentes here with us in the call, we're going to look at one of Nick's games called Troit for the Color Computer. And right away when I launch it, you're going to hear some really cool sound effects that are time shared to allow animation to take place. And then you're going to hear some what seems like background music on this title screen. I was pretty impressed with the title screen, so check this out. Very cool. So what we see here is we have the sounds in the background, and we had a really cool Atari sounding explosions effect when the game first came up, and we have scrolling going on, and we have what sounds like music and sound in the background right now. So press S to start, and I love the sounds. This sounds like an Atari. And you got to remind me how to play this, Nick.
Use the arrow keys.
What color am I? Am I the white
You are
one?
the white dot, yeah. And basically, your goal is to get those dots in the top and bottom of the screen, those green ones.
Okay.
And avoid the blue ones, and avoid the lasers appearing on the right hand and left side.
And this is a great use of sound. And the sound doesn't seem to slow down the game when it's being generated. No, I just have to pick up the things. I don't have to take them anywhere.
No, yeah, you just have to knock them all out.
Okay. Yeah, I love the sound effects. It's very Atari-esque sounding.
And this is in slow mode. It gets faster as you progress through the game.
Cool stuff. That's great sound. It's great sound. And I also hear the sound of my cat in the background there, real quick.
I think that explosion scared the cat.
That's cool stuff. And look at this. I just beat Nick Marentes.
And you beat CoCo Tandy, which is even more famous.
That's right, yeah.
Mick Tandy. Alright, so hopefully you've learned by now that the Color Computer was not really designed to play music in the background. It did not have the hardware designed to support that. We had some really clever software folks who made it happen. But what Tandy ultimately provided for us was what was called the Speech Sound Pack. And what we're looking at right now is the first game to ever take advantage of the Speech Sound Pack. It's a game called Gana Buena, or however you like to pronounce that. And what we're going to hear in just a second is kind of a little intro title music here. And you're going to hear that there is speech as well. And so that music was a lot cleaner. And I'll go ahead and I'll fire up the game for just a second here too. So the music was a lot cleaner. You didn't kind of hear those kind of 60 hertz cycle sounds in here. When you get captured, you hear the synthesizer saying, "They got you." When the screen kind of zooms in and zooms out, that is also being played in the background, so it doesn't pause the animation while it does that, which is a pretty cool feature. And even these little pickup sounds now, these sounds are pretty similar to how the standard CoCo version sounded. The only difference is they're being done in hardware now and not with software. And so it's just a nice feature. Because this was the first game to use the speech sound pack, it did not have a lot of background music, and even the kind of intro song, it wasn't multi-voice or polyphonic, but it was still cool. It sounded good. Very clean sounding notes. There was no kind of oscillation to that sound or anything like that.
Yeah, the warbly sound that a lot of the...
Yeah, the warbly, that's a good word for it. Yeah, and I just heard the voice synthesizer telling me I'm almost out of time. So a lot of games at best just added speech, but a few added music are really good use of sound. So this was the first, and this one added a little bit of everything. It had music, it had sound, and it had speech. Now we're going to show you pretty much what we'd consider to be the flagship product to take advantage of this cartridge, which was Pitfall 2. Both done by the same author. So Steve Bjork did Gana Buena, and Steve Bjork also did Pitfall 2. And Steve Bjork, coincidentally, did the Clowns and Balloons that we showed you earlier. So Steve was a guy who really knew how to add music whenever possible. So stay tuned for that. We'll be right back. Hey guys, it's the original gamer StevieStrow here, and I want to talk to you about the CoCo Crew podcast, hosted by John Linville and Neil Blanchard. It is a delicious journey into retro computing featuring the Tandy Color Computer. So if you are into vintage computing, retro computing, old school gaming, and especially if you're a CoCo nut who's into the color computer, you gotta check out the CoCo Crew podcast at cococrew.org, also available on iTunes and Stitcher. And tell them the original gamer StevieStrow sent you. And what we're going to look at here is Pitfall 2, The Lost Caverns for the Color Computer 2. Very cool game. And one of the best uses of continuous background music. Matter of fact, it was such a good use of music that after about a minute, you've heard enough. It was a very repetitive song. Here we go.
Polyphonic.
Polyphonic. You hear chords in there. You also hear him jump. So the jumping sound is mixed on top of that. And this is not eating up the CPU. So you got full animation. And the other thing we'll see is we can actually scroll. So it would have been tough to get the Color Computer 2 to scroll while playing this much music, wouldn't it have?
Oh, Color Computer 2, definitely.
Yeah. So to get a CoCo 2 to do this much animation and this much scrolling with continual background music would have been a tough feat.
Yes.
So basically, by spending an extra $100, you could get what real computers have built in. That's what the speech sound pack did for us.
It would be kind of like the early PCs, because of course the PCs only had those 1-bit speakers, which were even worse than the CoCo's built-in 6-bit DAC, and they had the same issues, and they ended up, building sound cards you would buy, and basically the sound speech pack was a sound card for the CoCo.
Right. And so the old saying is that necessity is the mother of invention, and so when you don't have it, somebody will make it. So the original PCs didn't have sound either, and we ended up getting the ad lib and better things. So cool. Let's go ahead and wrap on that. We got maybe one more to show, but this was Pitfall 2, and this is definitely the best title to showcase continuous background music, polyphonic background music, all done in hardware. All right, and what we're looking at here is probably one of the best uses of sound, where there is some speech in here, and the speech was pretty unremarkable. But this game had really good use of sound. A lot of white noise, a lot of like FM synthesis sounds. It sounded like a lot of Atari type sound effects. So get ready. You heard the man say. So this is F16 Assault by Dicom Products. I don't know if I'll... Yeah. Okay, so the explosion effects, they don't slow down the computer. Those explosions there when I shot the helicopter, they're not overwhelmingly intricate sounds. Now, that sound there, that explosion sound, that sounded like an Atari. That was, kind of, you could hear the pitch bending and all that kind of stuff. That played in the background, and there was no slowing down of the animation. I guess there's no rapid fire here. I guess not.
No, you have to hit the button.
Yep, it's a button masher. But yeah, so this game here was not only pretty remarkable just for its graphics, but adding this element here with the sounds was this was a good use of sound. Again, by today's standards, none of this is that impressive, but on the CoCo, this was extremely impressive at the time. It's basically what an Atari 2600 could have done 5 years before this.
Minus the speech, I guess, because the Atari 2600.
Yeah, minus the speech. But, yeah, so kind of sounds like the balloons popping in Clowns and Balloons. But that sound there with the rockets launching, that's done in hardware. It's not slowing down the scrolling. So it was a good use. And there were a total of about 24 different games that took advantage of the speech sound pack. But we kind of showed you the best 3, because the rest of them basically just added speech. And sometimes the speech didn't really add to the game. Although I would say that probably Gantlet, was it Gantlet or which one used it now?
Yeah, Gantlet used it. It was basically what the arcade game did.
So Gantlet did it, and that was actually an element in the actual arcade game. So some of the games, it just felt like a crowbarred on feature where let's just add some voice to it, but it didn't really help the game. Whereas Gantlet, that was part of the experience in the arcade. You had that guy saying, oh, Elf is about to die.
Doors and,
yeah. So to have that, although, it wasn't as good as the Atari version in the arcade, it was there, and so that was a nice feature that paired up with that experience. So, but yeah, I think we've heard the sounds. I think we've heard enough.
Yep. And quite a few of the other games were adventure games, and they basically just repeat with speech, what you were reading on the screen. Which I guess if you're a blind adventure game player, maybe that was so.
And that's a good point. Is that for the disability aspect of this, which I'm not sure, it was probably mostly intended for entertainment, but that's a thing now.
Yeah, because there's also like a chess game, box chess, that used to say your moves out loud so you could keep track of where you and the computer were playing too. So.
Yeah. So we are going to show you more CoCo sound in future videos. This was kind of an introduction, and this is kind of showing you what the Color Computer 1 and 2 were capable of doing with both software and with a little help from its friends with some hardware with the speech sound pack, which was a pretty cool thing to have at the time. I think one of the things that Curtis pointed out was the timing for this. I believe the speech sound pack came out around 84.
Yeah, late 84, I believe.
And the Color Computer 3 came out in 86, and the Color Computer 3's abilities allowed it to achieve most of this with its processor much more effectively. And so the need for this, there was a very small window where this would have had a place and a usefulness in the world. And I think the CoCo 3 kind of relegated this to irrelevancy. But it was a cool thing. I remember having it because I was a kid who was into games, and I was a kid who owned a CoCo and didn't have all the sounds and whistles that some of my friends had. Anything I could do to get something to add a little extra oomph to my CoCo, I was all about having that. I'm glad I have one now, and now that I've relived those memories, I think there weren't that many.
And also to go, the other reason I don't think it was that popular, and Nick had brought this up when we were pre-discussing this segment, is that the sound speech back was an extra cost, but it also, if you plugged it in, you could use your disk drive at the same time, or a cartridge, because your cartridge swapped the sound speech back. So then you had to get a Y cable if you knew how to do that, and if you only knew about Radio Shack and not third party, they didn't offer one. So you'd have to find that, or if you were at Radio Shack, you'd have to buy a multi-pack, which was a couple $100 or pretty close to that. So then all of a sudden the cost combined is like $300 extra, which is a whole brand new CoCo. So a lot of people didn't bother.
Right. So if you didn't already have a multi-pack, which for whatever reason I did, I don't remember why. I think it's because I had an Orchestra 90 card, and I think I had my X-Pad too. So I had reasons to have a multi-pack anyway. So for me, it was just another add-on. But for all those reasons you just pointed out, this would not have been just a $100 add-on. This would have been roughly like a $300 add-on. And Nick pointed out too, I didn't develop for this because I didn't have it. And shame on you, Tandy, for not giving this stuff out to your developers. You know, every developer should have had a CoCo with floppy drives and multi-packs and sound cards. And if you wanted to take advantage of this stuff, you know, give it to the people who are creating the content, you know. So,
and one other side note, the originally planned deluxe CoCo, which was supposed to be out in late '83, basically when the CoCo 2 got introduced, did have one of these built in.
Oh yeah.
And you know, motherboards were made and everything else, and then all of a sudden Tandy decided, you know, in their infinite wisdom, cancel that project, and the CoCo 2 was brought out for much cheaper instead, supposedly due to a shortage of EDGs. And then we had to wait for the CoCo 3, which didn't come out for another 3 years past that.
Yeah, what could have been a deluxe CoCo with built-in sound? That would have been something. And just think of the content that could have been produced for it, you know?
And some was. I mean, Microware had the deluxe CoCo drivers up and running because they had prototypes for months.
Okay.
And I don't know for sure, but I believe they actually had support for the sound speech chip built in those 9 at the time.
Excellent, excellent. Well, I think we'll wrap up this video, but what you can look forward to in future videos is we'll probably show you a little bit more of what some of the music players for the CoCo 2 sounded like. I do remember Musica. I don't remember Lyra, but we'll probably showcase Lyra as well. So we'll show some of the music players, and then in a further segment, we'll get into some really cool CoCo 3 stuff, because there was a lot of games for the Color Computer 3 that did effectively play continuous background music digitally, foreground sound effects digitally, and offer hardware scrolling. So the CoCo 3 was pretty much a dream come true for everything that CoCo 2 could not do. So we'll have a few more segments on Color Computer music and sound, but this was part 1. This was everything the CoCo 1 and could. This was everything the CoCo 1 and 2 could do with and without hardware assistance. And my very special guests for this video have been all the way from down under, Nick Marentes, and from the Great White North, Curtis Boyle. And in sunny South Florida, I have been StevieStrow. So thank you all for watching. We appreciate it. And we'll see you all next time. We'll see you at CoCo Fest. If you can make it, come to CoCo Fest. And until then, long live the CoCo, everybody.